INFJs make up 1.5% of the population, and that makes this the least common of the 16 types in the United States. INFJs are known for appearing kind, deep, and friendly in a somewhat mysterious way. They prize genuineness, creativity, and vision, and they combine this with their hardworking approach to bring their innovative and often people-focused ideas to fruition. It is said that INFJs believe impossible takes a little longer, but not much. INFJs generally show a desire to help individuals grow to reach whatever their full potential is and fulfill their dreams. This is most easily accomplished in areas where the gist of expectations is laid out in a supportive and harmonious environment, and the INFJ is allowed to do things in his or her own way. INFJs often become accidental leaders when others follow their example. Often, INFJs take joy in expressing their creativity through hobbies and metaphorical musings, and they are passionate about finding meaning in what they do. As family members and friends, INFJs are typically extremely devoted and loving, and they take on the role of encouraging personal growth and understanding the feelings of those closest to them. Welcome to Personality Playbook. I'm Sadie Young.
And I'm Kayla Whittle.
And if you haven't noticed, today we're talking about INFJs. So in case you're wondering what wacky order we decided to do the types in, we kind of thought that we would do them in the order that we think people are interested in type. Yeah. So we decided to do NFs first.
Yep.
And then we're going to do SFs and then NTs. And then ST. So if you are an ST, please hang in here with us. We promise we will get to you very soon.
Right.
Yes. So as we kick into INFJs, that was the general description that I wrote years ago for the Personality Playbook website.
Right.
And I also will add to this that we always come up with a few adjectives to describe the different types. So the ones that we have for INFJ are insightful, sensitive, original, and empathetic.
Love that.
And of course, you may find, especially since we're going through the NFs today, there's always going to be a little bit of overlap because NFs are similar creatures in general, but have a good many differences. We'll also mention, and if this doesn't make sense to you now, I promise there will be videos on it, but for those who are already familiar with it, I'm just going to list off the type dynamics of an INFJ.
Yeah. Well, and just to jump in here for a second,
sure.
When we're saying NF, we're meaning your two inside letters.
Yes.
Right? So that's what we're going to be kind of like working through. We're like NFs, and then we'll add on those outer two letters. So if you're thinking, what are we saying NF, right? I just wanted to say that just for people, because we obviously know what we're talking about.
Sure, you're right.
But when we say NF, so we're thinking like Sadie and I are both NFs, but very different NFs, right? So INFJ versus an ENFP.
Yes. So this is all, the videos that we're working on first are the ones where your two middle preferences are NF. So that is INFJ, INFP, ENFP, and ENFJ. Bless you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Unfortunately, we have no cure for sneezing. So the type dynamics, which we'll definitely get into more as we move forward, but just to list this off for people who are already familiar with type dynamics, INFJs are dominant introverted intuition with auxiliary extroverted feeling. Mm-hmm. And this is where your brain starts to scramble. Tertiary, you gotta love the word tertiary because it means third.
Yeah, it's just it's too fancy.
Yeah, it sounds like a disease to me.
It's like hors d'oeuvre instead of appetizer.
Exactly.
Like why?
It's, because that's just, people want to be fancy about it. So tertiary thinking and inferior extroverted sensing. So if that doesn't make any sense to you, don't worry about it today. Yeah. It's not that big of a deal.
We'll get into that more down the road.
At some point.
Yes.
So from there, we're just going to talk about INFJs. I guess.
And Sadie is an INFJ.
I am an INFJ.
So, I mean,
no coincidence that we did me first,
from the expert herself.
The horse's mouth, so to speak. Yes. Except I prefer to be a donkey's mouth because I'm into donkeys, not so much horses.
Donkeys are a lot more fun.
No offense to horses. They weren't offended.
No.
But if they are, then society has really gone too far.
Yeah.
So, when I start thinking about myself as an INFJ, and it's funny because I obviously wrote this description and, you would, I guess I could have written it where I agree with every single word of it, but that's not necessarily what INFJs are.
Right. Because you understand that there's individuality even within a particular type.
Absolutely.
So you're going to speak in generalizations related to that type,
Right.
whether or not that's specific to you or not.
Right. The thing that I identify with the most, and I believe Isabel Briggs-Meyer said this, was, actually Catherine Briggs, Isabel's mom, who was the one that originally started thinking about type, was an INFJ.
Okay.
And actually Isabel was an INFP, so we'll talk about them next.
Okay.
But the sentence "impossible takes a little longer, but not much" is just beyond me. Like, don't tell us we can't do something.
Right.
Even if you're really right, because we will figure out some kind of crazy way
to make it happen.
And this is one thing you can totally ask Ben, because I am stubborn. Now, I will say there are varying degrees of stubbornness in INFJs, but if we really want to do something, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then
it's like Maria on The Sound of Music.
Oh, fun.
I have confidence in sunshine.
Yes. And very much like Maria in The Sound of Music, sometimes you really have to, like, as an INFJ, we'll have confidence about certain things, and other things we have to kind of fake it till we make it, which is what she was doing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I don't think she was an I, but I think, some of those things were there. But
yeah, but that song definitely tracks with that for sure.
Well, I'll jump in on this a little bit too, is that that sounds like a positive always characteristic, right? And I mean, even to the point where it's like, hey, you can probably, and this is true, accomplish things that people think that you probably couldn't accomplish, right? Because you do see that. Unfortunately, sometimes if you relate that to people, then you have confidence in what they can become more than they do, which again can make you an inspirational leader. But can also make you hold on to some crappy people. Does that make sense?
What are you trying to say?
Because there's like a shred of hope of what they could be, right?
Yeah.
So like the positive side of that is that it's absolutely inspirational. Sometimes people just need you to speak into what they could become. And an INFJ has a beautiful way to do that because they have this cool perspective. But at the same time, as an INFJ who is in interpersonal relationships with people, you have to be able to say, they're not going to do it this way.
Sure.
They're not going to accomplish that thing. And they don't need to be a person that I'm pouring into in the hopes that impossible's not that impossible.
That's true.
Does that make sense?
No, it's only you told my life story just then. I don't get it at all, except exactly that. So yes, that's very much, there's a thing called the INFJ door slam.
Okay.
So it's something that people talk about. There's so many Facebook groups on different Myers-Briggs types, and the INFJs frequently talk about this door slam thing.
Okay.
So, alongside of that, so that's basically when you like completely cut somebody off. So I always say that INFJs will give people 10 times as many chances as they probably should.
Yeah.
Because, there is that deep-seated thing, like we tend to see the good in everybody.
Dumb and Dumber. So you're telling me there's a chance.
So you're saying there's a chance. And so, it's funny because one thing I'll say about INFJs, and this is definitely true for counselors that are INFJs, especially, is that we want to help individuals reach their full potential.
Right.
We're not necessarily concerned with figuring out, like, we're not trying to tell them what their full potential is. Right. We're fine with whichever way they want to go with it, but we want them to reach whatever that full potential is. Yes.
Self-actualization.
So, like, if your dream in life is that, you want to be, I don't know, a hockey player or something, we'll...
Hockey player? Where did that come from? Look at you.
Somewhere. It came from INFJ La La Land, which is also a thing. So,
it came from Riley and Inside Out too.
That's who I was thinking about
knew
when I
it.
said that. So I was thinking about Joy. And
Yes.
I didn't actually make and I only recently watched that movie because Kayla told me I had to. And it was so good.
It's so good.
but I digress. So yeah, if you really want to be a hockey player, then,
Right.
Even if we know that maybe you're not talented enough to be a hockey player, we're going to try to help you find a way to fulfill that.
Right. Which makes her a great counselor, right?
Sure.
To say, like, I'm not going to put parameters on what your potential is. I'm not going to put rules on what you should or shouldn't do. I just want you to reach fulfillment in your life for whatever that looks like for you.
And I want you to figure out what that is.
And I want you to figure out what it is. I mean, that's a great characteristic for a counselor. Super cool.
Although one thing that I've talked with you about before, and I think I mentioned in one of our previous episodes, is that sometimes it can be hard for us to wait for that. That's that J part.
Okay.
So, we like for things to at least be moving forward.
Yeah.
And so that can be difficult sometimes as a counselor. It's not for everybody. People learn that skill that are more patient, perhaps, than I am.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's like, hey, we talked about this. You know what you want.
Yeah. And
why are we still the same place we were last session?
Yeah, I can sit in it for a while, but that's one of the things that I think I like about teaching and training, which are the same and different.
Right.
Because that's something that I can be a little more directive about, rather than having to wait for the other person to
move. Because there's a real balance in the counseling room between, like directing.
Yeah.
Because there does have to be some, a little bit of structure, but it also has to be like tied up very loosely.
Yes.
The structure does, because things happen and
we like that part. The gisty part.
Yeah. People reach roadblocks that you don't anticipate, and problems happen in life or whatever. But no, I could see that. I could see that with the J piece.
Yeah.
In there. And to speak to that a little bit as well, I think we often point out that this is this is the most rare type.
Sure.
But I think because if you want to speak to this, I think you'll have better words than I do, but I'm going to ask you the question.
Okay.
So why is the NF plus J feeling rare? Does that make sense?
Why? Oh, yeah, because NF is it's exploration.
Right. It feels open-ended. It's
extremely
this theoretical, like maybe metaphorical place.
Yeah. And when you add the I to it,
right,
it's exploration of the mind.
Right.
Really,
yeah. So it's like intrinsic.
Yes.
Right.
So, yeah. So the J piece is rather unusual with that, because that puts a stop to it. It definitely feels like it feels like a Roomba, when it just keeps, it's like it's moving, and it, when it keeps trying to not hit the wall,
right,
it just keeps kind of bumping into that next piece to move around whatever the obstacle is.
Yeah.
And,
it's
so
scaffolding. It's scaffolding and like free form art, right? So you're like, wait, how do you fit in here?
Yeah.
Right.
And so, so that's, like whenever an INFJ hears about a new thing, because I think introverts in general are not crazy about change, but NFs tend to be better with change than most people.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
those two parts are very, opposite of each other. IJs tend to be like stay here.
Stable.
Stable. And NFs tend to be woo.
Yeah.
And so, that can be a little bit frustrating with those two pieces trying to bump into each other.
Right.
So,
and it feels a little bit like whenever you just look at an NF type and whenever you look at the J or the IJ, that would be why that's more rare, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's these like functions that seem to be at odds with each other, but somehow like work out in this really cool way for an INFJ.
But it definitely, the piece that works about that is that we tend to be able to have this crazy inner exploration and come up with all of these wild ideas, have, major imagination, and then bring a lot of that to fruition.
Right.
Because of the J piece.
Right.
But it is a battle the whole way.
Sure.
Because you're trying to figure out the right place to cut off.
Right.
Yeah, those thoughts. What that turns into for me a lot, I refer to myself as a refiner.
So that's good.
My old, one of my old bosses when I sold mattresses That's when I started getting really into spreadsheets. That is not an INFJ thing, okay?
Yeah.
Spreadsheets, not normal. Now, let me be clear. I loved designing spreadsheets, and I did them in a way that would save lots and lots of work for the people who had to fill out the spreadsheets.
Right.
I hated filling out the spreadsheet.
Right.
But I
designing
loved,
them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was for a people purpose,
That
even
tracks.
though it wasn't a people thing.
Sure.
And I was being able to create them in my own way because the ones we had were terrible.
Right.
So I became known for that. And so I would talk to my boss about a spreadsheet that I was designing, and I would work and work and work and work. And I would think about it every way I possibly could. And I would finally send it to him, and he would say, "That's amazing." And by the time he was done looking at it, I had already made it better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he used to joke with me. He'd be like, "You'd send me the most amazing thing that I've ever seen. And then 10 minutes later, you'd make it better. And 10 minutes after that, you'd make it better." And it was funny because I couldn't make it better until he looked at it.
Yeah.
I needed that feedback.
Right.
And even though, he wouldn't say this is a problem, he would just say, "How does this work?" And when he said, "How does this work?" I was like, "Oh, I wasn't thinking about it in the way that you are. And I'm going to go back and improve this."
Right.
So, he would always joke. He was like, "I really should just wait until the 5th time because then it'll be perfect because I already thought it was great."
But the feedback is what you needed along the way. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So, we have those pieces. Another piece that I really wanted to touch on that was in that general description was the part where genuineness is important. Now, this is going to pop up with all of the NF types.
Right.
It's a major piece. INFJs, though, one of the most common conversations I've had with other INFJs is that if you have a friend, and let's say your friend did something terrible to you, terrible, 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 or they just did something terrible in general.
Right.
And the friend lied to you about it.
Mm.
When everything comes out in the wash, when we find out what happened, yeah, the bad thing's bad, but we're mostly going to be upset that you lied.
Right.
So many INFJs will tell you, we'll almost appreciate somebody who is rude and obnoxious and horrible if they're upfront about it.
Right.
We would rather have that than somebody who's pretending to be good.
Right.
Because
that definitely stretches, I think, over a lot of NF types.
Sure.
But you can count all the ways, right?
Oh, yeah.
That was fake. Does that make sense? Like the J in you is like, okay, this.
Yes. Well, and that's
like, let me spell it out for you about why you were not genuine and why you needed to be and why it would have been better for you and for me. Right. Yes. Let me count the ways, right? Whereas other NFs might just like lay in their feelings like, "Oh, that was horrible. You weren't genuine to me." Where NFJ is going to say, "Well, let me show you all the ways this was bad."
And an ST might be more upset about the thing that you did.
Right.
But we're more upset.
How could you do
we're
that?
like, I can forgive the fact that you,
robbed a bank.
Right. Yeah. That's way better than anything I was thinking. Thank you. I was like, don't say that. Don't say that. Don't say that. Thank you for saying it. I needed an extrovert there. Yeah. So that genuineness piece is very, very important. As is the being able to design your own way of doing things, I would say. So, we will have to, like when somebody tells us a process, I remember this used to happen all the time when I was in sales. The company that I worked for would come up with how they wanted us to sell things.
Oh, ouch.
I couldn't stand it. And there were, lists and check boxes for the secret shoppers that would come in. And that is not how I work.
Right.
I'm like, do you want me to sell a lot or do you want me to do it your way?
Right.
Pick one because you can't have both.
Yeah, I think I would venture to say a lot of NFs have dived into sales at some point.
Not so much the INFPs. That was one of the few types that we never had.
That's true. Yeah.
But the other NFs we had lots of.
Sure. Yeah. Because we, see people and kind of where they're at and how to connect to them, like kind of go into their world.
Right.
Like you can't go into their world on an SOP.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like you can't, like, hello, listen, that means that the SOP that I'm going to use to sell to Sadie needs to be different than the SOP that I'm using to sell to someone else, you know?
And it has to, particularly for introverts, it has to fit into your framework.
Okay.
So, like, you have to put it through your internal filter and feel out how the way that somebody else wants you to do something, like, is that something that fits with who I am as a person, which is an overly deep experience, but that's how it goes.
That's so interesting. So for me, it's let me observe you for a little bit. Like, as I'm an ENFP, remember, I know we're not talking about them right now, but definitely NF on the you know, the two interior preferences. So it's let me observe you for a while. Let me get to know you. And then I'm going to jump over into your process with you.
Gotcha.
That's how I visualize that.
Okay.
Like, I'm going to jump in with you.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Does that make sense?
It makes
you're
sense.
like, let me rearrange my framework. Let me figure out where I'm at so that I can like align with where you are. Where for me, it's just, and the observation doesn't take a lot of time.
Yeah.
You know, like
we resist for like 25 years before because, you know, and of course, this is kind of changing the subject. My experience of life, and I'm thinking of Lisa, if you're watching this, I'm thinking about you.
Lisa.
The boss that hired us to work together to start with.
Yeah.
People have not very often said this to me, but she did because she's that person.
Yeah. We love that about her.
So where she always experienced me as being much more difficult to work with, difficult to get to do what she wanted me to do than other people.
Right.
Or than I experienced myself. So, you know, she would express to me that I was stubborn, and I would be like, I actually don't care about that thing that much, and I don't understand why you think I care about it that much. But there's something about my exterior, like, and when you tell me to do something and I haven't gotten to put it through that internal framework, I just want to say no. And I think that's an IJ thing.
Because I was going to say, you sound like Chad, which is my husband, right? So it's just like he needs to process it.
Yes. And I've learned
his timeline.
Now, exactly.
Yeah.
I've learned now that I'm not going to end up at no. So it's probably better for me to not.
There's the difference, right? Because my husband's an ST between his I and his J.
I know.
And you're an NF, right? So he's like, I'm probably going to end up.
Right. Let me come up with a better case than no, and I'll come back
I can't just jump at no. Like, I have to like let him know that I thought about it.
And Ben and I spent the first 10 years of our relationship working on that with him, because I'm like, don't say no. I'll actually start a conversation with him, but don't say no, don't say anything. Go away and think about it. And he's, you know, like chomping at the bit to say no.
Stop, collaborate, and listen.
Exactly. Ice is back. See, that one I got right off the bat. I missed a hairspray reference earlier, and not this kind of hairspray. The musical. It's
all right. I have karaoke problems over here.
I usually am too, but I just totally missed that one.
You're fine.
So, there are probably a lot of INFJs out there going, wait, I'm not that kind of stubborn.
Right.
We know we're stubborn, but, you know, so I really, and I honestly, I greatly appreciate that she would point that out to me, because nobody else ever would.
People could perceive you that way.
Yes.
Right.
Because I was assuming that people saw me as the extremely flexible creature that I'm not.
Yeah. Let me tell you how you're going to perceive me. This is how.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, I'm this delightful creature who magically lands on exactly what you were hoping, which also happens to be what I was thinking in my deeply held beliefs that you can never pry away from my cold, dead hands.
Right. But that piece, that refiner piece, or like, I think Strengths Quest would call that maximizer.
Except I'm not.
You're not a maximizer.
I am not.
But that would be the same.
But yes.
Right. Is this like, let me see a process and let me refine it. Let me get it to a place where it's better. If you don't understand fully you.
Right.
Could absolutely be a rub.
Sure.
Right. Like, gosh, can't we just do it? Like it. You know what I mean? Like, there's those personalities are like, can't we just do, like, we already know. Why are we going to stop and take time for you to refine this process? Like, let's just march through. You know what I mean? Like, let's just keep doing what we've been doing.
To me, I can't do that because I know it can be better.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And so, and that also to a lot of people appears to be me changing my mind a bunch of times. And to me, I've always been on this path. I'm always
Right.
headed in this direction. I just got better at it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't want to butcher a Maya Angelou quote, but, you know, when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can't not do that.
Yeah.
So,
No, I love that.
yeah. So instead, I just apologize.
And you know what
for
else
it.
I love?
What?
INFJs.
Oh,
I do.
I love ENFPs.
Yay.
And they're, you know, that's one reason that Kayla and I work so well together.
Yeah, we get each other.
Yep. We always used to say we were each other's favorite coworkers, and here we are.
Look at us.
Yep.
Doing our own thing.
Woohoo. So I promise you we will end up getting more into INFJs and each of the types as we move forward. This was sort of our first general. We wanted to give you a good description of INFJs, especially if you're still searching on your type and trying to figure out what it is.
Right.
And of course, as we mentioned, you'll notice, especially on NF Day, there's going to be a lot of similarities between the types.
Absolutely. Yeah,
we'll
work hard to talk about the nuance of how the outside letter preferences impact the inside letter preferences.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm trying to like put that in regular language.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I'm working on. Because if nobody knows what we're talking about, I don't want to be, you know, like.
I know. I always used to have to say that to people about selling mattresses because they'd be like, don't they understand that blah, 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 blah? And I'm like, no, they don't work here.
Yeah, they don't get that.
You know that because we trained you.
Yeah.
So there will be much more to come on INFJs. If you have any questions about INFJs,
yes,
we are more than happy to answer those for you. But I think for this particular segment, we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah. And as my kids would say, like and upgribe today.
Upgribe. Ninjas. We love the ninjas.